We're just gonna talk. We're just gonna talk. But what I was gonna say, as we were just talking, is why it's so difficult to tell this is because I'm telling you from two different perspectives. I'm telling you from what people would call their higher self perspective, and then from the earthly perspective. So, let's say Gemini, for example. So you have Castor and Pollux. The twins, the twin flames, all these conceptions that we have against pairs or twins comes from Gemini. It's Gemini. So that divine pair is how I see all of this, because it's perspective. It's like that's the stars, the constellations that I was born under. Because my mind is split that way. Because I have my mortal twin and I have my immortal twin, as does everybody else. Because that's how this is all split. That's how existence partitions itself. That's why we say as above, so below. We have immortals and then we have mortals. So we're split that way in of ourselves. It's like we have these bodies, which represents that mortal aspect, and that false ego is the driver of that body or that mortal vessel. And then we have our higher selves, or our true ego. And that true ego, or our higher self, is the driver of our spiritual body, that immortal body. But both of those things dwell together to create this form and this experience that we're having here. So I'm telling this story from the perspective of both, because I have memories of both. It's what everyone is chasing is... Everyone is chasing the divine. They're chasing the end. They feel some sort of conclusion, a singularity. They feel something approaching, the transcendental object, the other, whatever it is, God, something's coming for them. Everyone feels this. Now, imagine if you knew this from that perspective of you coming here and gathering up and just embracing everyone in that energy. So you being that energy coming here. So to you, it's like you exist outside of time. So to you, it's not a matter of in this point in time this is going to happen. It's more that you're always waiting to embrace the world with that energy, but you have to wait until the world is ready to receive the energy. And that's what, so it's a coming thing. We, as we grow in consciousness, we just feel it's present more and more and more. So I have my memories from both perspectives, from the perspective of being a mortal being, being a human being, being a fake person. A person means a mask, wearing a mask, playing an actor in a role, playing a character. So yes, my avatar has experience here. I was born in this continuum, this timeline. So being here, I have an avatar. But my spirit, who I am, fundamentally did not get into this continuum and did not make itself present in this continuum until just recently. And the reason why is because the mortal side of myself had to accept that, had to be in the right place at the right time in the unfoldment of cosmic events that had to play out in this linear time continuum to be able to receive that energy in what we perceive at the right time in order to bridge that gap to be enveloped in that energy that's always been present and waiting, that I call not my subconscious, I call my spirit. Because I know my spirit. So why would I put something so vague on it as my subconscious? And this is what was explained and known. And this was the core of the philosophy and how people understood the existential nature of reality because of thought and who thought is. Because that's who I am. And who I am, and that's what I mean by I'm back. Not that I'm back, I've always been here. But what's come back is the full connection between that transcendental aspect of self and then the mortal aspect of self. So the mortal aspect of self has been in the same drama, the same story as everyone else has. Because these mortal bodies have been playing out the story of existence, right? It's been filling in the backstory of all the things that are, will be, and always have been. This is the playing out of that. So a being that is outside of time in the first place, like we all are who belong to the family of truth, then you come in at points in time. Unless you get lost in here, then you just repeat and swim in this repetitive stream of time. But for those of us that retain our memories, those that they call the adepts, those that have the knowledge, those of us that are wisdom keepers, those of us that have pursued it, those of us that would do, that were, our roles are not to lose it. So that's all that needs to be understood. My role is not is to never to have lost this information. Because to have lost this information is to mean to have lost a connection that couldn't have been lost because that very connection is my being. So to not have that connection is to not be. It's the whole Aristotle, to be or to not to, or to be or not to be. That is the question. There is no not to be, because all I know is what I am, and what I am is what has always been. Because to not know what I am is to not be, and to not be is to not have being. To not have being is to not exist. But we are existing, so we can know that that is true. And by knowing that that is true, and that means that you can tap into all the knowledge that that contains, because it belongs to you. It's inherent to you. And for me, it's about reconnecting back to that channel. Now, other people tap in that channel that they call divinity because we are all fundamentally part of that. But they're only getting aspects of it that they interpret with their lower mind or their false ego mind. That has been conditioned and taught in system and in a language which is not divine. It's anything but. So it's almost impossible to try and understand what the divine is with something that is the antithesis of it. It's like it's this world, and why people can't understand this world, because the very tools that they're using to understand this world are derived from this world. You have to use trans-dimensional tools in order to understand this world, or else the very tools that you build, you're building with consciousness, and the consciousness is the very fabric of this reality. So you're limited by the very consciousness itself. So unless you remove yourself from being just the consciousness to being the observer of the consciousness, then by being the observer of the consciousness, then that means that you are not bound by the consciousness. That means that you have trans-dimensional sight, because you are the active player while everything else is playing out around you. That's what it is to be back in your center, back home, back in full knowing of who you are. So what Thoth's role is, or Hermes, or Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, Viracocha, Ishu, Elektra, any of these names you want to throw on him, who has been the guiding spirit? He is the guiding spirit. He is the Word that became flesh. He is the Word that became flesh, because what is the Word other than divinity? Expressed. So he was expressing divinity while in an avatar, and able to bring others up to the same level, or to a level of consciousness, so they could develop themselves into an understanding of this connection. So everyone here has a role, and that is my role, and that's why I say I am back. So as these two different points of the same line have been coming from two seemingly different places to meet themselves in the middle, I remember the journey from both ways. So from a descending way and an ascending way. So from the descending way, I've always been connected. I've always seen the others. People call them angels. People call them all sorts of different names. But the celestial beings is what I knew them as. I knew them as my caretakers. Because as I was a child and left alone for very long periods of time, that's who was my comfort. That's what was my connection. So I didn't know any world other than that. I didn't grow up in a world other than that. It's a world to where I knew I was here to do something. I knew that I'm here for a job. I've always said that I'm here for a job. I know that I have a job to do. Now, when that job was to be activated in the linear time perspective, you're seeing it. But in order to get to this time, life had to be experienced through the avatar in order to bridge the connection so that we can have a common understanding. Because what would it be to have a being come from a so-called another dimension or heavens or whatever, but have no relation to you? Not know your experiences, not know your struggles, your strifes, what it is to be human.
Then he wouldn't have any he wouldn't be able to relate to us at all, or that being could not relate to us.
That being couldn't. And what that would mean is that being only has one perspective, and that being does not have full perspective. If that being doesn't have full perspective, that being might be all-knowing, but definitely not all understanding. So it's the ones that it's the being that's walked in the trenches. It's the being that's been here. It's the being that wouldn't tell anyone else to do something that he hasn't done for himself. And that's the key. Walk the walk and talk the talk. Because this is an experience. It's a progression to a concrescence. It's like perfection. Perfection just means that nothing is changing. If nothing is nothing isn't changing, nothing is in movement, nothing's happening, there's no activity. But by the very nature of activity means that it is no longer in a perfected state, but it is chasing the perfected state, which makes it perfect. So perfection, the true definition of perfection is something that is in action, something that is pursuing the very barriers of its seeming limits and breaking them continuously. Because it seeks the best version of itself always. And it's relentless with it, it's ceaseless with it, it's enduring with it, it is that's what that is. And that's what we feel because that's what we are. So we all belong to that, and it's a very complex history that we have, or past that we have. I mean, the people that want to understand this, the people that feel like they need to understand this, the people that feel like they resonate with this stuff, you're trying to package existence into a story. It's like you have to give yourself some credit. It takes a while to unfold these things. That's why we've been talking for 19 months.
Yes.
Because through those 19 months, we've created a bridge of language so that we can express and articulate these things in a much easier way than it took during those 19 months. Because during those 19 months, it was about creating a mutual language through bridging bridging everything with understanding. It took a lot of time because the way that people use words and their intent and meaning and emotions and these things and all these elements don't add up with each other to come out in a single seamless expression, usually, mostly. And that's what makes it very difficult for people to understand anything. So that's where I'm going to leave off for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just kind of flow with that one. I don't know. Seems about right.
That was good. That part of that was